I had just gotten out of college and got my first real job. I was making pretty good money, and I wanted to buy my first house. I was living in an apartment, and I was looking for a house of my own with a little bit of land. I started going online and looking at different websites for houses that were what I was looking for, something that was outside of town and that had some land with it. There were three houses that I found that were exactly what I was looking for, so I called and set up times to go look at the houses. A week before I was scheduled to look at the three houses, two of the houses sold, so there was only one house to look at. So the day came, and I went to take a look at the only house that was left on my list. I met with the real estate agent outside, and she started giving me the basic info on the house before we went in to take a look. As we're standing there talking, I happened to notice there was a woman standing in the yard across the street. She was an older woman, and she was just staring at me, but it was almost like she was looking past me. I looked back at the real estate agent, and then we got ready to walk into the house. I turned back to glance at the woman across the street, and she wasn't there anymore. So we walked in the house and started looking around, and I noticed that there was a lot of dust and a lot of cobwebs. It was clear that no one had lived in this house for quite some time. I asked the real estate agent if she was having trouble selling the house because of a leaky roof or something like that. She said there was a housing development that had been built a few miles away, and so a lot of people were interested in buying the newer homes. They weren't interested in buying this older house. I asked about the previous owners of the house, and she didn't know much about the previous owners. She only knew that it was a foreclosure. I walked through the house, and everything looked good to me. It was just what I was looking for, and it was the perfect price for me. So I put in an offer, and it was accepted. The day I moved in, I had a friend from work help me out. We were moving boxes into the house, and I had gotten a box out of the truck and walked into the house, and I was walking in the living room and going to put a box in the corner, and I noticed that there was candle wax on the floor in the corner. When I look closer, I see what it looks like dried up blood next to the candle wax. It was just a small amount of wax in that dried up blood, so I decided to leave it there and I would get it later. I went back outside to get another box, and I see the woman from across the street, and she's standing in her yard. She had that same not so friendly look on her face again. The only thing I thought to do was to wave at her and try to be neighborly. She just nods her head, turns, and walks away. My friend walks out of the house and sees that I'm looking across the street and says that he saw the woman standing in the yard before he walked in, and he said she didn't look very happy to see a new neighbor. So my first night in the house, things started right away. It started as most typical ghost stories go, with the bump in the night. I was completely asleep, and I got woken up by people, or what sounded like people, speaking to one another downstairs in the living room. When I was able to fully wake myself up, I stopped hearing the people talking. When I heard the talking, I couldn't really make out what they were saying. It was very muffled. I thought maybe it was the TV on, but I was sure I'd turned the TV off before I came upstairs. I wasn't hearing it anymore, so I just turned over and tried to go back to sleep. As I'm laying there, I start to hear footsteps downstairs. I jumped up and I grabbed my gun out of my nightstand and I went downstairs to see what was going on. I thought that someone had broken into the house. I ran down the stairs and I didn't see anything. I checked the doors, the windows. I even went downstairs in the basement and everything looked normal. Nothing was moved or out of place. In my mind, I just figured that maybe it was an old house that I wasn't used to and was just making strange noises. I went upstairs and I got back in bed. I'm laying in bed and I can feel myself starting to drift off to sleep. I hear my door open and I turn over and I see this woman dressed in all black walking into my bedroom. I couldn't see her face because it was so dark, but I could hear her mumbling something. It didn't sound like any language I had ever heard before. She starts walking closer to the bed, and just before she gets to the bed, I jump up and I realize that I was just dreaming. It was just a dream. My door was still shut, and there was no one in my room. I had trouble falling asleep that night, but somehow I was able to finally get some sleep, and I never had any more strange dreams that night. The next day I was leaving for work, and I could see the woman across the street was staring at me again. This time she was looking through her front windows. She was just looking at me with that same creepy look. I just got in my car and I drove to work. All day at work, I was just thinking about that woman that I saw walk into my bedroom in my dream. Later that night, I was at home and I had fallen asleep on the couch watching TV. And that night, I had another strange dream. It was, again, that same woman dressed in black. I saw the woman walking around the living room and she's lighting these candles that are on the floor. And then she starts pouring blood around the candles. Then all of a sudden she turns and looks at me like she had just realized that I could see her. She extends her hand and points toward me. And that's when I felt a hand on my right shoulder. And I woke up. I look around and I'm still laying on the couch. The TV's on. So I decided to go upstairs and go to bed. The next day I went out to the mailbox to get the mail and I noticed that the mailman had accidentally put some of my neighbor's mail in my mailbox. I figured this would be a perfect opportunity to go see the woman across the street and to introduce myself. I go across the street, knock on the door. The woman comes to the door and I handed her the mail and explained that the mailman had gotten it mixed up, and I introduced myself. Then I asked her if she knew the people who lived in the house before me. She says that there were a group of women that lived there before me that she says were witches. She said these women practiced witchcraft in the house that I was now living in, and that at one time these women tried to get her to join them. She explained that she would hear and see all kinds of weird things happening inside that house all hours of the night. She says that She believes that at one point these witches put a curse on her, or she believed they had put a curse on her because all of her pets started to die or go missing. At that point, I was so creeped out, I decided to cut the conversation short and I went back to my house. That night is when the worst dream happened. I had a dream that I was tied down to the floor in the living room. I see the woman who's dressed in black, and she's walking around me and she's pouring blood on the floor around me. Then I start to hear what sounds like some kind of chanting in the corner. I look over to the corner and I see these three other women that are dressed in black also, and they're chanting. Then these three women who were in the corner, they walk over to me and they grab my face. I tried to fight my way free, but I had no control over my body. These three women, they pry my mouth open, and then the woman with the blood, she comes over and she starts pouring the blood in my mouth. It felt like I was starting to drown, and that's when I jumped up. I jumped up and I realized that it was just a dream. I was laying in my bed with the door shut. That was it for me. I couldn't live in that house anymore. I believed that things were only going to get worse from that point. And before it got any worse, I decided to sell the house. So I contacted a real estate agent and I had the house put on the market. I moved into an apartment while I waited for the house to sell. But the house never sold, and eventually I ended up going into foreclosure. I hated losing a house that way, but I was glad that that house wasn't my problem anymore. I believe that woman who lived across the street. I believe that those women that lived in that house before me were witches, and they had put some type of curse on that house. And those witches that lived there before me were going to make sure that no one lived in that house in peace.